This is DJ Lokesh reporting for Fever Radio on the subject of knife crime and also gang violence, which comes as a part of that. We are very lucky to have both Lewis and Owen Seabrook, who are documentary filmmakers and have been involved in the making of the documentary Cut Short, Fighting Against Knives in the North, which I understand has now been distributed across schools in the country as a kind of a resource for teachers to use to talk about and engage with students on the subject of knife crime, an ever-increasing and troubling part of British society. So welcome to Fever Radio once again, Owen and Lewis.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, cheers, Lukesh.
My pleasure, sirs, my pleasure. Let's start, first of all, with a little bit more of a poignant piece of news. We've got this Knife Angel sculpture, which is at the Royal Armouries Museum in Leeds during the month of February. A 27-foot tall figure created from more than 100,000 seized blades by the British Iron Work Centre. And it highlights, or it's intended to highlight, the negative effects of violent behaviour and the need for change. Something I've yet to see. Have you guys actually, you guys have been a part of the launch of it, haven't you? And you've been there this week.
Yeah. So we were down there last week. I think it was last Thursday when it officially opened. Sarah, who's one of the main contributors in the film Cut Short, Sarah actually spoke at the opening, so she was sort of sandwiched between Alison Lowe, the Deputy Mayor of West Yorkshire Command Authority, like the head of police in the region. There was a head judge there. I think is it PC Lucy Ledbetter, who was sort of involved with bringing it to Leeds. So Sarah spoke before the launch, and then we went outside, and we spoke to. Or she and Owen spoke to media outside underneath the statue, which is bloody imposing.
I mean, what do you think of the relevance of the statue is? I mean, beyond obviously, it gets attention from organisations like ourselves, for instance, media outlets and such like. I mean, what do you think is the power of the sculpture?
I mean, I think it's certainly like daunting to look at, and you can really get up close to it in person and see the individual knives and cleavers and machetes and things that have been kind of welded into it. So it gives you an idea of the scale. I guess the hope is that being able to publicise the Knife Angel is coming to Leeds and then to whatever city's next, it just keeps it in that conversation and keeps reminding us that knife crime is something that is very present at the minute. It helps us to just not forget that it's something that we need to deal with.
I'd absolutely agree with what Owen's saying there. And I think, as testament to that, when we were there on the day, it was amazing to see all of the organisations that along sort of a journey of how someone could become involved with knife crime. There were organisations that were, involved with young people right at the sort of start of that journey that could prevent it, months, years before they get involved. Or there was organisations sort of throughout that whole thing, and they were all there in that one room. And it just shows when, by no means in Leeds have we got the answer to this problem just yet, but it shows that there's a willingness for organisations across the community to act on this and all turn up and hear from Sarah and hear from all these other key figures and start to look at how we can better make our young people feel safe and like they don't need to carry these knives.
I mean, it's really a difficult problem to think of a solution, and it's going to take, I guess, a lot of interested parties to do that. I was just thinking about it in preparing for this interview here today. Like, where do you put pressure? Do you put pressure on schools? Do you put pressure on students? Do you put pressure on teachers? Where is the appropriate place where we can get the best effect? And it's really hard to figure out an exact area where it would be appropriate, where there's a simple solution. There doesn't seem to be a simple solution. I mean, just yesterday, there was a 13-year-old boy in Bermontofts, again, just around the corner from us over here, in Leeds 8, who was involved in a knife attack yesterday. 13 years old and potentially life-changing injuries off the back of it. So, you guys, we spoke last year while you were just getting ready to launch the documentary film, which features Sarah and the tragic story of her losing her son Kieran some 10 plus years ago, also featuring the story of Wilson, a former gang member, just again around the corner from us here at the radio station, who went to prison, and now a very positive story of him kind of turning his life around and trying to send a positive message around knives and gangs out there. But I mean, for you guys in developing this film, what stood out to you most? What things have struck you most about the problems to do with gangs and knife crime?
We had a number of like really interesting conversations in the film with obviously Sarah and Bilson, but then outside experts. So we spoke to like a trauma surgeon from the LGI. We spoke to an ex-gang leader who now is reformed and speaks to young kids about exploitation. We spoke to someone who's still in gang and kind of pointed out the falsities in that world. And like the thing that just keeps coming up and keeps reminding, or kept kind of appearing really obvious to me, was this is absolutely like the people who are saying that this is a public health issue are completely right. There's been debate over whether the young people are criminals, whether they should be treated and looked at and seen as this is a crime problem. But all the interventions that are to do with addressing the fact that most of these young kids carrying knives are underserved and need some form of guidance, and there are more human ways of addressing this issue that might encourage them to put on a knife. They're the ways that work. Statistically, like the Glasgow violence reduction unit have employed a lot of those methods and seen some really good in like kind of results in terms of the impact that it's created. And whenever we've spoken to people that have been in that gang world, the thing that they've really opened up to us is that human side. So it's like saying that, I didn't know what I was thinking when I was in that world, or all that mattered to me, all that I kind of believed in was that this was what was made for me, and that I didn't really have much promise anywhere else. And it was only until they kind of burst that bubble and understood that there was more for them, until like as soon as they realized, as soon as something pushed them out of that world and said, this is not the place I need to be in, they've been able to turn their life around. And I think for us that the whole design of the film, the way that we've kind of told everyone's story in this kind of experiential, non-authoritative, this is what's happened to me way, is hopefully a way of maybe popping that bubble for other people, so that they can watch it and say, okay, if this and this has happened to Sarah and Wilson and the other characters in the film, maybe this world isn't made for me, and maybe I should go and try and do something else.
I mean, what do you think is the benefit to kids in school who've been shown the film and have a teacher to kind of guide them through it? Like how do you think what do you hope the impacts will be, or how does it work on the kids?
I want the young people to just have an awareness of the cycle, because the people that are at risk, the people that are carrying knives, they hear one story, and that's their kind of elders or the people they look up to saying, you want to carry this for your protection, and it kind of keeps them ingrained in one method, one kind of mode of thought. And as soon as we can show the wider picture, they're saying that, like, like I mentioned, there's a really interesting conversation with this ex-gang leader, and he in the film talks about how he would exploit young people off the street and into his gang, and start off by just giving them a tenner as pocket money, and right up to getting them to carry guns for them and stuff. As soon as, if we can give young people that awareness of like, this is the wider cycle, and this is the part that people are trying to make you play in that cycle, it might just give them that little bit of insight that helps them to make a more informed decision and say, actually, I know where this is heading, I'm not going to bother.
And by no means are we saying I don't want anyone to sort of misinterpret the message of the film and the teaching package as it's all on the young people and it's just a matter of saying no. It's not a just say no campaign at all. But what the film and what we were just talking with yourself, Lakesh, about media does really well is engage people on issues, and it starts conversations. And if a young person watches the film in a class or a youth organisation or whatever it might be, and thinks, do you know what, actually, I don't really want to be carrying this knife, I can see where it's going to go. And this film sort of, we're having this is now an ideal moment to bring this up to the teacher, or to bring this up to my youth worker, or to bring this up to whoever. And it might just be a matter that them bringing it up leads to them being signposted to an organisation that can support them getting out of gang or support them with whatever it is that's going on that's led to them being involved in that situation in the first place. And so that's sort of, for us, that engagement is sort of key, and the reason that we've made this film, we've made this teaching resource so that any youth facing organisation, not just schools, not just colleges, can use it and rip it apart and use it in whatever way that they see fit to engage their young people, because they're the experts of, talking to and dealing with their young people. So we've tried to make it as sort of flexible and modular as possible so that it starts those conversations in whatever form.
It's great that there's that resource available, I think, and to get the conversation started. And then, like you're saying, Owen, to take away some of the ignorance around what might be happening with the person in that situation can also be can be very empowering, I think, for the children. As I said, there is no one specific fix to this by the looks of it. So it does need to be addressed from a number of different angles. I mean, another thing that comes out of, I was looking at some of the videos of, kids who've been filmed playing with knives in Leeds city centre, et cetera, and you look at some of the comments. I mean, there are a lot of comments which go kind of down the path of this is an example of multiculturalism has failed in the UK. I mean, you just mentioned Glasgow there, which, from my understanding, is one of the knife crime capitals of the UK. Maybe I'm wrong there, but you can correct me if that's the case.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you say to somebody who says that knife crime is an example of multiculturalism failing in the UK?
I think it's one of the common misconceptions that it happens in certain areas and it happens within certain groups. And in fact, it's actually across the board. So part of the film is we reached out to regional police forces to get a breakdown of like via a freedom of information request, like they were legally obliged to provide us with a breakdown of where knife crime appeared, the ages, the kind of electoral wards or the postcodes that it all happened in, and what we got back. I mean, we got pretty much the entire span of the north and a little bit like the Midlands. What we got back was like knife crime is happening in every borough of every county. It's and below the age of 18, like it's and upwards. It's something that is just across the board. Girls are carrying knives, boys are carrying knives. It's not just different cultures. It's people that have just been brought up in white communities, and everyone is at risk of doing it. And we've seen through cases that have made the news that it's not always people from impoverished backgrounds. There's there's well-off kids that are carrying knives into school and getting in trouble for it. One of the big things that I think is another thing that we've came across through making the film is that it's very easy for people to say that's the reason why and look at it as a this happens to other people problem. But that's kind of one of the barriers to any sort of positive action is the assumption that knife crime happens to them and not me. And as Sarah found out, like as soon as it happens to you, you realize, oh no, knife crime is a public risk, and it's something that devastates not just the person in the altercation, but however many connections removed from that person, the families and the friends and the community around that person. And it's something that if kids just felt, brave enough to not feel the need to carry one, that's the ultimate solution to the problem, is that kids just put down the knives. But it's getting kids comfortable to feel, to get to that point to not have to, do it.
I mean, what do we think is causing the drive and the take up of knives amongst the youth? Is there any thoughts on what could be influencing that?
I think there's a number of factors out there that make someone more vulnerable to picking up a knife or to becoming involved with a gang or youth violence. And we're not. I think it's the sort of stuff that for most people will make sense. If someone's from a background, a more impoverished background, or they grow up in an area where there's less opportunity, where there's less youth services, where they're in a small overcrowded family home, or where they can't afford heating or whatever, and they're going out and they're trying to find that community. They're trying to find that sort of safety or that sense of belonging out and about on the streets. There are, when we're not telling anyone anything new, I don't think, here, when we say that those sorts of vulnerabilities make those sorts of factors make somebody more vulnerable. But I think that paired with sort of current trends, social media, we sort of found and saw as being a bit of a contributing factor. I think I sort of hate to say it, especially growing up, and I know Owen also grew up as sort of like a rapper and hip hop fan when we were younger and stuff. But I think there is some role of media in sort of exacerbating tensions, and especially when it's like sort of more local, maybe musicians, and their like beef is finding its way into. I've watched like YouTube videos, and the sort of beef videos being slung around Leeds, and you sort of hear about incidents that have happened around the city being included in some of these tracks and stuff. And I think all of those things add to. But it's complex, and like Owen said, there's cases where over in Manchester there was, I think it was 3 private school students, and one of them ended up being stabbed and killed by 2 of his friends, and all 3 of them were carrying knives. And you just think, well, what on earth has led to that? So it is complex, and well, we've got ideas about what those factors are in Leeds, and from the conversations that we have, but it'll be different in different regions. And I think that's why, going back to your earlier question about why something like the Knife Angels is quite important, or why it's important to regularly have sort of these people involved with the issue meeting, and focusing and refocusing on it, is because there needs to be that will from, different parts of the community, from in those communities, tackling this issue, because it's going to have different factors for each and every different community over the country.
Yeah, and the impacts are just so massive, aren't they? I mean, massive for the victim, of course, massive for family and friends, even for residents, who are in areas where there's a lot of knife crime going on. The fear that starts to develop of living in your own area, going to the shops, your kids going out to play, whatever it might be. Health services, obviously, there's a direct impact there, and then just social cohesion as well. Everybody starts to fear that somebody could have a knife in their pocket. What does that do to how you act and interact with people? There's so many areas it impacts, isn't there?
Just off the back of that as well, and how does that make young people feel in those areas? Because it's the sort of thing that feeds back. And if a young person feels unsafe, and there's a potential threat that someone that they disagree with or they don't get on with is carrying a knife, there's way more likelihood that they're going to then start picking up a knife, or them and their friends are going to start carrying, and then you've got another gang carrying a knife or whatever. So yeah, 100%. The impacts are so far-reaching, and that's something that we sort of explore in the film.
Honestly, I mean, it's so hard to put a finger on it, but like you say, the consequences cut across social backgrounds, across geographies, across cultures. I think it's striking at a deeper problem of social cohesion or unity within Britain, really, like that these kind of things are happening. But I'm no psychologist, and we need to get somebody a little bit more specialist on that to break it all down, I guess. Okay, great, guys. You've done fantastic work. You've done fantastic work in shining a light on a really, really important problem, and also giving Sarah a great representative for the cause. You've given her a great voice through the things that you do. So how can people find out more? Where can they find the movie? How can they get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like Google is going to be pretty forgiving on whatever you type in, but the film is called Cut Short: Fighting Against Knives in the North. So if you type in Cut Short, knife crime film, knife crime documentary Leeds, anything like that, we're called Tell Studio, and on our page there is a page for Cut Short. And if you're a teacher, a youth educator, if you work in any way with young people and educate them, you can access this film and the free teaching guide that it comes with, which is like lesson plans and worksheets and discussion guides on the film. If you go to tell.studio/cut short, you can sign up for that and you get it for free.
Lewis, I'm going to give you the final word.
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. And she couldn't be with us, or he couldn't be with us today. But yeah, just Sarah and Wilson. This whole project wouldn't have been possible without them. Both incredibly brave people doing incredible work. And yeah, we sort of have helped them out a little bit with the film, but this all stems from them and their experience. So, you know, testament to them.
And they're continuing to do great work in the area as well, post the release of the film. So the documentary is called Cut Short, Fighting Against Knives in the North. Owen and Lewis represent Tell Studio, so you can also find things that way. And Wilson and Sarah Lloyd are the kind of lead characters in the movie. For my part, I would say I'd like to see the film and this kind of discussion happening with kids in schools across Leeds, Yorkshire, and beyond. I think it's such an important issue, and one that we just can't run away from, given the current rates of incidences that we're seeing here. Once again, Lewis and Owen from Tell Studios, thank you so much for making time for us here at Fever Radio today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Lakesh.
Thanks.